Hello, welcome to the Big Ideas Show. Dave Sharp, Academy FM, you are my guest for today, aren't you? Hello.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Today we're talking about, do audiences matter, right? Interesting topic for someone who does radio. You'd think they do, but let's find out after these titles a bit more about what they do. Welcome to the Big Ideas Show, and today my guest is Dave Sharp from Academy FM.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. We've moved from the radio arena to the video arena.
That's right.
How does it feel to...
Not something I'm comfortable with. I'd rather not be seen, personally, but I'm okay at the moment.
Okay, well good, don't worry, we'll get the cameras there soon. And our conversation today is, I guess, counter to what people might think, because we're talking about, do audiences matter? Mm-hmm. Do you really need an audience? Mm. Which I think is a really interesting chat coming from a radio person, studio.
Yeah, I work for an educational charity, because Academy FM is an educational charity. That was mainly set up to work with the young people in the Folkestone Academy. And we deliver what we're doing, that work and other project work that we do, mainly with other schools, to be honest, through the medium of radio and audio production. And so the radio station isn't the main thing that we do, it's just a way that we deliver work. Mm-hmm. If I was running a radio station on its own, just as a radio station, a community radio station, audience would be pretty much everything. But the focus really is on the educational work that we do. And to do that, I don't actually need an audience, although, as I'm sure we'll discuss later, there's a reason for wanting an audience, but it's not needed for what we do.
It's a really interesting kind of standpoint, and like I said, not something that I had assumed or considered might be where you're coming from, but we're going to get to know you a little bit more. Might give us some insight, and then we'll go further back into that discussion. So, Dave, I would like to know, consume, create, or curate?
Create.
Okay. Best audience you've ever presented or delivered to?
When I was working as a sound engineer for Radio 4, so the immediate audience is the people that you work with, producers and studio managers or whoever, and then there's a wider Radio 4 audience. Okay.
Favourite thing about what you do?
When I get the chance to be creative with sound, that is my first favourite thing, which goes back years. The second favourite thing is working with the young people in the academy and primary schools as well, and working with them and seeing them grow up and be helped growing up by what we do with them.
Okay, great. What's the best piece of feedback or compliment you've ever received from an audience?
I can't think of a single one, but this goes back again to when I used to work in the BBC as a sound engineer, knowing that what you did was good because you would get producers wanting to work with you and wanting to help produce their programmes, and that's great. Yeah, that's good.
Nice. How do you make work or content that grabs people's attention?
You have to make the right sort of content for particular people. In my case, I really work with sound, so you have to make things that sound right, but the main thing is you have to make things that sound right to get the message across. Mm-hmm. Some people in the past, I guess, have made radio programs that sounded fantastic but didn't really have a message. They didn't really say much. And some people have made radio programs that actually said a lot, but they were so poorly produced that people didn't want to listen to them. Finding the balance is a really important thing. Yeah. And from when I used to work as a sound engineer doing that, it took time to learn that. And, I think, I'm not sure even I've got it completely right now, although I've got a fairly good idea of how to do it. So I think that's very important.
Okay, great. How do you get new listeners if they've never engaged?
Sometimes you have to try doing things on different platforms. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to try doing different things in terms of programming. And sometimes, audiences just come to you without you even trying to find them, because people want to try new things sometimes. there's loads of internet radio stations in the world, and they might not actually, like for a station, let's say in the United States, won't do any sort of promotion to anyone in the UK, but people in the UK will still listen because they've gone out and found that radio station. So it's a two-way thing.
Okay, so a little bit as well of just being discoverable, even if you're not actively doing anything, being easy to allow those people who are looking.
And making content that some people will find interesting. Yeah,
all comes down to, at the end of the day, you've got to have the good content.
Content that people want. It doesn't have to be good, because there's a load of rubbish content out there. Look at some of the tabloid newspapers and so on and so forth. You have to have, if you want an audience, you have to have content that people want.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting point. It doesn't have to be good, not like that. And what's the future for audiences and how we engage them?
I think a lot of it is going to depend on the technology available. And the technology has really always driven audiences, from the introduction of the printing press to radio to television to the internet, and different ways of delivering content in that way. And I'm not a futurologist or whatever. I don't know what's around the corner. But I suspect that there's going to be a great diversity in ways of people delivering content. And I think that while that means that there's many ways that that an audience can engage with people who produce content, one of the problems can be that there are so many ways that people can engage with content that they don't engage much with any specific content provider. Not that long ago, you had people that would essentially get their news from either the single newspaper that they read in the morning, or a radio or TV, or maybe a couple of radio or TV providers. And essentially what you're dealing with is potentially people getting their content from really just 3 different production houses. Whereas now it could be 1,000 different production houses, and that's happened in the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Yes.
So and I can see that disseminating more in the future.
Yeah. I'm adding on an extra question here, just because it's something I've always been interested in, is do you think we're at the stage where there is so much content out there that people will kind of engage less? I mean, I know I personally sometimes am so overwhelmed with how many different things I could watch, and as a result I don't really know where to start, so I kind of go, I don't necessarily watch anything.
I think people are engaging more, especially because of social media. It's just that they're engaging more with the same sort of stuff, because, as you know, what appears on your feed on Facebook or whatever is largely generated by what like-minded people, your friends, are sharing and posting and so on. I think an unfortunate thing is we're relying less on curated media, like in the traditional sense, the BBC or a Sunday newspaper or something like that, where you will be surprised by the content. You will read or see or hear things that you didn't know about before. Whereas now, a lot of what comes up on my Facebook feed still just continually tells me that Donald Trump is an idiot. Okay? And I've worked that out myself, thank you. But it just keeps on coming through. And whereas if you read a Sunday newspaper, hopefully an unbiased one, then maybe you'll find out different sides to different stories. And I think that's becoming increasingly lacking in people's media diet, if you like.
Becoming more narrow.
Did I just use the phrase media diet? Crikey, where does that come from? I'm sorry about that. Shoot me now. Yes, does that answer your question?
That does.
Okay,
okay, those are the quickfire questions. Let's go back then to our main topic of discussions, which is around, do audiences matter? And you were saying about how, as an educational charity, it's not, the primary focus is not the audience, it's the skills and experience that the students learn, right?
Yes.
But where's the balance in that? Because I'm always fascinated with this idea of how does you need an audience in order to be able to stand up and deliver something, because otherwise you're shouting into the void, and we don't tend to do that very long. And
there's no point.
And the obvious example of a comedian, if a comedian's got a flat audience, they're suddenly going to go, oh, geez, God, they don't like it, and they're going to lose all their confidence, and they're not going to be funny.
Radio's different, though, because you don't see the audience. And this is a great thing about community radio, because one of the things that community radio does is it gives people the chance to broadcast. And so you can get people with a particular, interest in music, say, come and do brilliant specialist music radio programmes. And in some cases, they will have actually a sizable local audience, and we do for some of those on our station. But for some, in the past, maybe they've had very, very few listeners. But the thing is, the person putting all those hours into making that show doesn't realise that there's not many people out there, because you can't see their audience and you can't see their reactions. And but the person making the programme themselves has got something out of it. Now, if they were to try and move into, onto the BBC or commercial radio, unfortunately they may never get a job there. But at least that person has got something out of it. So when talking about radio, I think that is quite interesting, in that you can't really see the audience. And for a community radio station like us, which is very small, we don't have official listening figures as well. And unlike some radio stations, you can't tell like who listens here and who listens there and so on. So yeah, the audience is going to work different in radio than they do if you're dealing with a comedian or something like that. Yeah,
so there's more, I guess, not emphasis, but maybe opportunity for creation in a more organic sense, because you're not so harshly, oh, well, this hasn't got the ratings, so therefore you're off.
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword.
You don't get the feedback. Right?
You could have programmes. There are some community radio stations in this country which are very, very niche and undoubtedly don't get very large audiences. And I'm not saying what they're doing shouldn't happen or is bad. It's just that not many people listen to them, but people still go ahead and create that content. It's not for me to discuss whether that's a waste of someone's time, because if they can raise money for it and do it, then fair enough. For us, there are several reasons for having a radio station as part of the charity. One is to deliver educational work. The other is to inform and give information to the local population, which I hope we do fairly well. And involving volunteers and so on is important as well. But we're a little bit odd at Academy FM, because for a variety of reasons, mainly the management. One of the things is we do exist mainly to do educational work, and whereas if we were just a little small local radio station, we'd be based in the town centre, we'd play a lot more older music, it'd sound all the same, we probably wouldn't do much specialist music, we'd be a less interesting radio station, but we'd probably have a billion people listening to us, like some other similar stations do. But I would turn down that audience, because I would rather do good work that is going to change people's lives in the future. Yeah. Okay, so how, taking this topic, this idea out to other people, because I think there's a lot of people online, small businesses, people who kind of want to be a blogger or an influencer, whatever it may be. There's, I had a conversation with Greg Stobbs and we were talking about making your mark. A lot of people want to be heard. I agree with what you were saying about not everyone does, but for those that do, what would you say is the lesson, kind of in some of what you've done, of not going, oh my God, I have to have a huge audience, but going, what is enough of an audience for you to be able to achieve your aims as someone who, wants to put stuff out there? It comes down to time management, I think. If we put a lot of time and effort into building an audience, changing the radio station's programming, doing certain things online, we could do that. But doing all that takes time. And within the budgets that we've got, a lot of which comes from charitable funds, we have to prioritise on the charitable work that we do, and I'd make no apologies for that. With radio as well, and almost radio in particular, when it's on a local level, ego is quite an important part of why a lot of people do radio. They want to be seen. They think they've got something to be said. They want to be on the radio and promote themselves and so on. And the good thing, I think, that almost the BBC taught me when I was very young was that you're just working with so many fantastic, talented people who are way brighter than I was at the Beeb. And it actually taught me that these people just are brilliant at what they do, and they just get on with their jobs, and they're completely behind the scenes, and they don't shout about it. You know, many of them, they're not really, you know, big on Twitter or anything like that. They just don't really care about that. They just get on with their job. And I really liked that, and I understand it. And on a local radio level, I think there's probably some radio stations that would actually be a lot better if they actually thought more about delivering to their audience rather than just trying to make themselves look really popular. You know?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so if it's about, as you said, delivering something to your audience, how would you normally go about, or what advice, or what was your thinking behind who that audience is? Because if, like you said, it's creating the content that speaks to certain people rather than, right, we want to get as big an audience as possible.
I suppose, to give you an example, with radio stations, you define your target audience. So you know whether you're dealing with particular age groups, maybe even particular genders. If you look at, say, Heart FM, then they will aim for a mainly female audience, I'm guessing, but probably between the age of maybe 25 and 45, something like that. Many radio stations would also define their social groups that they aim at. You know, they can be split into like the A's, B's, C1s and C2s and so on. So you can actually define that sort of audience. And with radio stations on a local level, really the way that you would attract that audience in the first place is simply by playing the sort of music that they'd like. What you do on top of that, which we do, is we try not to play music that's too similar to what other radio stations do. So you'll find that our output is more diverse, and we will play, certainly during the daytime, probably more 70s and 80s music, maybe a bit older and a bit younger, of course, but around then, when you compare us to KMFM, Heart, certainly Radio 1. Radio 2 does its own thing brilliantly, and no one can compete with them. But a lot about finding your audience on this level is simply about choosing the music that you play for that particular demographic.
Okay, yeah. So what would your take-homes be for anyone kind of out there looking to go, I've got something to say, or like it is in your case, you're using that platform to educate, so it's kind of slightly different, that how they should be looking to kind of create and build an audience, or not necessarily build it huge, build it right?
They've got to firstly work out why they want to do it. If they're doing it to make money, which in many cases is why people are doing it, then they've got to quite specifically work out what they're trying to sell, who they're trying to sell it to, and where those people are best attracted, whether it's on social media, and if so, would they like to see video there? Would they like to see posts about this, that, or the other? Are they radio listeners, or whatever? So you have to know really what you're trying to achieve in the first place. Some people probably want an audience just to make themselves, feel better, because it's nice if you've got something to say. If you think that people are going to engage with it. And that's one of the ways why social media, I think, can be brilliant. People always talk about the negativity of it, but there are positive aspects to social media. Because if you believe in a particular thing, socially or politically or whatever, then you can find like-minded people online, and you can write articles and you can post things and so on. And there's your audience, and that will make you happy. It really depends on what you want to do, but in many cases it comes down to money, doesn't it? And so you've got to find the right audience who basically wants to buy what you've got to sell. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. So, final time, how can people find out more about Academy FM, and who is that audience? What sort of things do you want people to get in touch about? If we're saying it's not all about just go on, listen.
I think, firstly, the practicalities of getting in touch with Academy FM. We have a Facebook page for those people who've heard of Facebook. And so you can contact us through that, or you can ring the radio station on 01303. Hang on, I'm trying to think of the number. 01303. I gave up my home number once when doing this. 01303 721059, option 4 for the office. And you can get in touch that way. If people are interested in radio and interested in broadcasting, then we are always looking for volunteers, people who want to present on the radio, who would like to interview on the radio, who've got interesting things to say and want to be involved in something that's kind of very community related. We've got a fantastic group of volunteers who do presenting and other things on the radio station, and people who want to be involved in that sort of thing, I think they can get quite a lot out of it. And it's not just about having your voice heard, it's actually about learning new skills and being involved in a charity that's working here in Folkestone as well. So if people want to be involved, then you know how to get in touch. So
brilliant. I think that's a great way to leave it as well, that it's not about come on, get your voice, come and shout through radio. It's going, what do you want to learn? Do you want to learn about communication and engagement? And that's great.
Yeah,
great way
I think that's what we want to give. So if people want to be involved, now you know how.
Brilliant. Dave, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, thank you.